drinking bourbon, sipping on some scotch. We get a little wild, but it's sure fun to watch. We love what we do, we're drinking every brew. Man, we talk some shit, but we're telling the truth. Yeah, we're the Scotchy Bourbon boys, raisins in hell and making some noise. Yeah, we're the Scotchy Bourbon boys, we're here to have fun and we hope you enjoy. We're here to have fun, yeah.
You can talk to Whiskey here. Our stage names. I'm Tiny. This is Whiskey. Jeff, Carl. So
it's to keep all the fans away, really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, paparazzi.
Yeah. So you have to use an alias. Actually, I just think Jeff likes to give people dumb names.
This
I'm a
is
Navy
true.
guy. We all have nicknames, so I'm used to it.
So, all right, let's see. We're going to here. Get this.
So you flew, right?
Yeah, I was a navigator, weapon systems. It was Goose, if you will.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I did that for about 10 years in active duty and a couple years in reserves after that.
So what was your name?
Fonda, unfortunately. Hanoi Jane.
Like Henry or Jane?
Unfortunately, Jane. When I was new in my squadron, the kind of rule is you don't speak for about 6 months unless you're on fire, and I just kind of absorb it. And I made probably a politically center comment in a very right-wing squadron. And one of the guys was like, whoa, check out Hanoi Jane over here. So she's reviled in naval aviation. So it was these call signs, they're not like the movies. It's kind of like you call it your nickname as a kid. Like you never really like it, but you get used to it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, So I was Fonda, which I don't even think about Jane Fonda anymore when I hear it. I just think of me. But
although that Tom Brady movie, I think it's called Brady 80.
80 for Brady.
Yeah,
80 for Brady. She's in there, and for how old she is, she's still freaking beautiful. I agree.
If you married Ted Turner, he would make you beautiful.
All right, I'm going to start quick sharing this and see if this actually works. Posted. All right.
Sometime when we're not being recorded over a beer in person sometime or a drink, I'll tell you some other call sign stories. There's some pretty hilarious ones that we'll probably better save for when we're face to face.
Yeah. I hear you.
Bourbon and whiskey.
I have some stories as well. I didn't fly. I went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy.
Oh, nice. What year did you graduate?
92.
92. Okay, so the guys that I knew that went there would have been a couple of years after you, but a bunch of my good buddies went there.
That's because I'm an old fart.
I always tell my buddies went to Kings Point. I always refer to it as SUNY Maritime just to piss them off.
That's all right. I almost went to the Coast Guard Academy. I still call those guys knee-deep Navy.
No, my buddies, the Kings Point guys, the stories those guys have from the summer, just like going on, I don't know if you call it on cruise or on whatever, but man, like, it's kind of cool. It's I'm pretty envious of what you guys got to do.
Yeah, I have some stories. And then I was over for Desert Shield and Storm, so
got it.
Some stories for
with the military sea lift, or
yeah, so they were running short of people, so they activated pretty much my whole class of cadets and one other, and they sent us all out for sea year.
Really?
Yeah. So I was in the Sacramento River taking an ammo ship out of mothballs. Nice. And sailed it over 3 times. So,
but you guys, I don't know. I don't know if it's class. I don't know how you guys. How fast can you haul those things? I mean, 18, 20 knots, or
so it took 28 days from
the
San Francisco Bay to Daman.
Got it.
So
yeah, nice. It's we have a couple of I forget which ones, but a couple of the military sea lift command. I don't even know what class of ship they are, but they're enormous down here in Baltimore Harbor. That are just cool. They're cool to see there.
Yeah, my nephew is I don't know, like 35, and he ended up at Cal Maritime, and I still tease him about that when I see him. I'm like, "What's the matter, buddy? Couldn't get drafted by the big leagues?"
Yeah, that's right.
I'm almost there.
It was like that way too with Virginia and people that went to West Point. Man, those guys are relentless with each other.
Oh yeah. Well, Arch, my business partner, he couldn't be here tonight, but he's a Citadel guy, so similar to like the VMI and the West Point guys. The there's a guy actually. I don't know if you know of. Have you heard of KO Distilling out of Manassas, Virginia?
No.
The one of the owners was a merchant marine guy. I think Kings Point guy. Bill Carlson is his name. So if you Google KO Distilling Manassas, he really good guy. He's probably, I imagine he's a couple of years older than you. But when we were starting out, he couldn't have been nicer and like just big support. Can't say enough great things about the guy. Yeah.
He might be the same age as I look horrible for my age.
Yeah.
That's what the dark rings and big fat belly will do for you.
What?
Yeah, check out KO.
Yeah.
That's normally that's what I expect from you. There you are.
Yeah, there I am. Yeah, it's not Jeff doesn't bring me on for the big guns, it's more like the 16-inch on the center mount. So
That's right.
All right, I'm just sending some there you go. I'm sending some people some directs that would like that, all right, couple more. Let's see.
He's just really randomly spamming people on Facebook to see who might show up.
No, I know people who would like American single malt, so I'm trying. There we go. Let's go down one. We'll do one more. All right, we'll do my cousin. All right, I've got that. Now I can watch.
I was gonna say, if it's any consolation, Jeff looks at me all the time and says, "Goose, take me to bed or lose me forever." So
all right, well, there we go. So now we're ready to go. I'm gonna have to put this on. Make sure this is a lot. All right. Check. Did I lose my
credit card?
I did. It's there. Checked it. Oh, that's the wrong one. That one's working and that one's working. All right. So the format for what we're doing tonight is we've been talking a little bit and upfront for on Facebook, and we shared it to a bunch of groups, and so we can monitor the comments as they come in. Sometimes they're very chatty and other times nobody's chatting. But at the same time, we have, what would you say? We're doing it live on Facebook. And then also I'm recording it for YouTube, correct? If you want to share, feel free. And then also the last thing is that we do the audio podcast. So when we start the audio podcast, we've got some audio that, because you're live, that we like to play. So we've got a theme song. We're the Scotchy Bourbon Boys themes. So we'll play that theme song. Plus we run a 30-second ad for our sponsor, and our sponsors, nobody can hear, but we got to be quiet for 30 seconds. Then we go into the theme song, and then we go from there once we start. So is there any thing specifically you wanted to cover with us before we actually start?
No. First off, it's all fair game. So if any questions, there's no off limits areas. So please feel free to ask whatever. Generally speaking, I think I know every distillery's got a background story. Ours is pretty unique. So I think kind of covering, a little bit of how we get started is always good. And then really wherever your interest takes you, I'm happy just to be here. So.
Okay. That's great.
Well, it's real hard hitting journalism. So it's
I got my attorney over here off the side here in case you guys ask anything I shouldn't answer.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you sending us the sample.
Yeah, thanks for having it.
Yeah,
Which
definitely.
we sampled already, by the way.
Good. Good.
Yeah. I actually on Saturday did a Facebook Live, just showing. So lately, for whatever reason, I'm getting samples, lots of samples. So I like to open them at least, sample them, and then
Close them back.
so
up.
it's not a surprise to me on the podcast.
Sure.
Yeah,
just get the general taste.
Who wants one of these?
Yeah.
That doesn't do real well on a podcast.
Right. So, but what's been crazy is I'm just Distillery after all of a sudden it's starting to line up a little bit, and I'm tasting a lot of whiskey, and the quality of what was 3.5 years ago when I started, when I would get samples where I was begging for them opposed to now people sending me them, and
Nice.
kind of it's like contact me and say, can I send you the samples? But the quality of the whiskey is definitely when it comes to the craft distilling kind of things and everything going on has been pretty amazing. I mean, I every time I'm just like, well, what's going to happen if I'm not happy? But we also understand that, when you're making whiskey, not everybody loves your whiskey. I mean, you want the majority of people to love your whiskey, but your American single malt, it's definitely a category on that and what you've been doing. And there's some people who don't like single malts. And so you can't, someone doesn't like a single malt, they're not going to like it, but you can win people over because definitely it's not Scotch where you're not like importing peat from Scotland and blowing it over. So it's there's a lot of stuff that's going on like that.
Agreed.
That's the same talk my dad had with me. Son, not everyone's going to like your whiskey, but hopefully most people will like your whiskey. And
what the hell? I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, my palate, I say to everybody, it's like it's a guide maybe, and if you align with my palate, just keep listening. But if your palate's completely different, you really should think about, honestly, find some place that your palate's the same, because as most people like lobster on the planet, but there are people who don't.
I know.
There you go.
I'm allergic to it.
Yeah, but that's not whether you probably think it's delicious though.
I've had it before.
Yeah.
It was a late in life allergy.
Yeah, it's delicious.
It's kind of like my allergy to you.
You're such all right.
So clearly you can see my role in the podcast.
Yeah, he just puts me in my place. That's why I like the podcast by myself sometimes.
Actually, most of the time.
That's why I like the podcast. Okay, there we go. I gotta turn that down.
Yeah, I was gonna watch the Facebook comments. I don't know if you want to.
You're gonna watch them?
Yeah, because it's easy for me.
You could take it off. Okay. Yeah, that's great. All right. So we'll start off once I get this going. I'm going to start getting the main podcast going in a second, and then you can give us a little bit of history because it's unique. Oh, also, us being in Canton, Ohio, Ryan Lang and ourselves, and what they're doing down there, we're getting close to them making their big announcement. But at the same time, when you sent that bottle to me, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting there looking, and you're like, distilled in Ohio and bottled in Maryland. And I'm just like, if that's distilled in Ohio and it's an American single malt, it's definitely Middle West spirits.
Oh, yeah.
Because Ryan is into that. I mean, that's something.
Ryan's awesome.
And all the barrel finishes that I saw on your website that you have, and we'll talk about that a little bit. That was kind of cool because, that's all Middle West. The Middle West is barrel finishes too. So I'm sure they were between the two of you, you're able to obtain those barrels.
Yeah, they've been an awesome partner. It's been incredible. Couldn't be more thankful to have those guys. And Ryan's a great dude. They make great whiskey. And they've really helped us really get started and grow.
And then what's really cool is you'll probably at one point see me because my daughter-in-law is from Maryland. So
nice.
My son has been going back and forth, and it's
a Zoom meeting, Jeff. You can see you now.
What?
He can see you now. There's a camera.
No, okay. So you might see me in Maryland. There you go. So, anyways, but it's funny because they're actually moving to Michigan by Traverse City. So it's like my whole brain works where like, well, I could go visit them, and then I visit the Traverse City Distillery. So, and then the same thing. Now, when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, that'll give me a reason to go visit her and meet her my in-laws.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, let me know you're coming. We'd love to pop some barrels open and show you around.
Oh, that's great. That would be great.
He loves to thief from the barrel.
Yes, my wife gave me this.
So is that from Vendome?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the exact same one in the distillery.
Yeah. So she surprised me with a tour. And then at the end of the tour, it's not like they got a gift shop.
I was worried there. I was worried it was going to be the lightsaber he built at Disney with the 6-year-olds.
But that is I love that tool. That is a really good craft tool. That's for sure.
Yeah, we have the exact same one from Vendome. It's great. Yeah.
Okay.
Killer.
All right. So let's get this going. We'll do the 30-second thing and then go right. Let me just queue up. Yeah, that's queued up. I'll hit the start record, and now we'll be live Facebook and
this is for posterity.
So here we go. Start countdown.
Hey, Scotchy Bourbon Boys fans, this is Alan Bishop, Indiana's alchemist of the Black Forest. So I'm tuning in here today to tell you all about the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute channel on YouTube. If you're at all interested in the art of distilling, whether it be home distilling or professional distilling, and the intense geekery that goes into that process, then check out the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube. I promise you're going to learn something you didn't know before about the art.
This is Alan Bishop, head alchemist at Spirits of French Lick. Be on the lookout for a brand new bottled and bond Solomon Scott rye whiskey. Made from a mash composed of 65% rye, 35% corn, and 5% victory malt. This 5-year-old 100 proof rye whiskey is a throwback to early 1800s style rye whiskeys of the Ohio Valley. Named after the legendary Daisy Spring Mill distillery owner turned moonshiner Solomon Scott of Paoli, Indiana. Remember, drink responsibly and never drink and drive.
Drinking bourbon, sipping on some scotch. We get a little wild, but it's sure fun to watch. We love what we do, we're drinking every brew. Man, we talk some shit, but we're telling the truth. Yeah, we're the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, raising some hell and making some noise. Yeah, we're the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. We're here to have fun and we hope you enjoy. We're here to have fun.
Right. Welcome to another podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Tonight we have Tiny, we have Whiskey, and then we have Mark. Last name?
McLaughlin.
There you go. I knew that, but I suck at names under pressure. And then from Old Line Spirits out of Baltimore, Maryland, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Woohoo.
So we have a wonderful podcast set up. It's great. We are live on Facebook also. So a lot of you guys are watching there and excited. So anybody having any comments or whatever, feel free to chime in. There's nothing been yet so far, but it is a Tuesday night. So you just never know. But we're the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, www.scotchybourbonboys.com. Check us out there for everything Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Also, we are on all major podcast formats. Check us out there. And then also we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. Make sure that you like, listen, comment, and leave good feedback. We appreciate that very much. So
quick shout out to James. First comment on Facebook. Welcome, James.
All right. Welcome to James. Mark. So we've had a lot of what would you say? A little bit of time to do a little bit of research. So one of the things that that makes your whiskey distillery special is the relationship you have with your partner, correct? And go into that a little bit. I mean, I read a little bit, but how did this come about? As far as making old line spirits.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, gents, for having me on here. Glad to be here. Appreciate the question. It's our our kind of origin story, if you will, is a little bit different than a lot of distilleries. In that Arch, my business partner, he and I were Navy buddies. We used to fly together for about 9 or 10 years on active duty, and then we knew each other on active duty a little bit, but never were in the same squadron. But both decided to get out of the service at a certain point. Both ended up moving to the Mid-Atlantic, and then we flew out of the same reserve squadron out here for a couple of years together, and just became real good buddies there. So yeah, it's just when I first met him, we had no idea we'd be making whiskey one day. We both like to drink it, but he was an engineer. I became an investment banker after the Navy, so really did not envision this. But a couple of years in careers that really weren't scratching our itch, and we started to think more about what do we want to do as opposed to what are we doing now. And that's where we just started kicking around, this concept of, starting a distillery. And originally, we frankly thought we were going to start a bourbon and or rye whiskey distillery for all the reasons you'd imagine. We love bourbon, we love rye. Bourbon's a quintessential American style whiskey, rye is quintessential Maryland style. And this whole American single malt just fell in our lap by virtue of being able to apprentice and learn from two guys who were looking to retire. So it's a very, very serendipitous path as far as how we got here.
Okay. Yeah. So you talk about the fact that it was it fell into your lap.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you guys were looking into doing that, and then as far as learning the skill, I mean, that's the part that it just worked out. I mean, it did.
Yeah. So decided to quit my banking job. I was working 80 something hours a week, something crazy. The time I wasn't working, I was trying to be home to see my wife and my kids. So it wasn't like I had an opportunity. When I started to think, hey, I want to start my own business, I want to make whiskey, I want to get in on this whole, movement that's happening. This is 2014 when I quit the job. There wasn't really any time in my life to stop and make a business plan and kind of think it through. It was kind of, hey, do I keep doing what I'm doing, cranking away, or do I quit and jump in with both feet? So to me, the obvious answer in my world was just quit and jump in and try to figure it out. And step one in trying to figure out how to start a distillery for me ended up being attending the American Distilling Institute conference in 2014 out in Seattle. I was going out there for a wedding anyway. I was the best man in a wedding. So I said, hey, this conference is happening right the same week. I'll go out there a couple of days early and I'll just shake hands and try to figure out, which way's up. How do I start? What's step one? And on the second day of that conference, I was sitting down checking my email on my phone, and a gentleman kind of plopped down on a couch next to me, starts chatting me up, and his name's Bob Stilnovich. And Bob was one of the co-founders of Golden Northwest Distillery, a tiny distillery out in a place called Sandwich Island, Washington, a jut of land out in the northern Puget Sound. And Bob had driven down about 90 minutes or 2 hours to Seattle that day because he was looking to sell his business. And the reason was his business partner / friend / Navy, since a fellow veteran and neighbor was terminally ill. So Jim Caudill, his neighbor, had a terminal lung condition. So this went from being a fun thing that two guys that were doing this, making a whiskey they loved, making a few bucks on the side out of a barn, basically on Bob's property. It went from being a fun thing for two guys to being a really hard thing for one guy who's 72 to do by himself, and because Jim couldn't help anymore, he was sick. So it was time for them to pass the torch. And right when we were looking to get started, and they didn't want this to go away, right? They had built this, they're very proud of it. They didn't want to just sell the assets and move on. They wanted somebody to pick up where they left off. And then, we're Iraq, Afghanistan vets, they're Vietnam vets. We just all hit it off. And ultimately, after kind of flying out there to kick the tires and see the operation, which was tiny, but it was really cool, decided that, you know what, I love bourbon, I love rye, but I love this whiskey they're making, and this is a new thing, a new category. Sure, let's go for it. So I also had some good advice along the way. One of our board members, who's a big bourbon guy, really nudged us in this direction. He's like, hey, man, there's a lot of great bourbon out there, but there's not a lot of American single malts yet. So you might want to look at this really hard. And that was really good advice. So yeah, it's right place, right time. And the ability to apprentice was huge. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but if somebody were to call us tomorrow and say, hey, I want to work for you for free and learn how to make whiskey, it's not necessarily a no-brainer, yes, because there's a lot of effort and time that goes into training that person and like giving them the value that they deserve for doing that. So it's not like I thought, hey, I can apprentice and learn somewhere to make whiskey. I didn't realize how rare that opportunity is, because it's really asking a lot of the person teaching you. And Bob's willingness to let us live in his guest house and stay as long as we wanted to make whiskey every day was really a game changer for us.
Yeah, that's like really cool. The opportunity at the right time when you were thinking about it. And you're right. I'm a manager to some extent, and when you got to pick and choose the people you put that time and effort in. Because now I understand, they were at that level where they're not going to be around. They were at the end of doing what they were doing, and they were passing it on. But you don't want to pass that on to somebody who's not going to take that knowledge and utilize it. But with that said, doing this podcast in the whiskey industry, the quality of the people that you meet, it's like there's 100% there. It's a combination of an art form and a hard-working individual. And when you take that and they understand it, it's usually what makes up a quality person. So you met a quality person who did it, and they're usually kind and giving. I mean, you don't run into a lot of selfishness in the industry. You don't run, and most people that you get to know, so many become your friends. And you're making American single malt, and where you've gone with this and where you've taken it, you've met people in the industry, and everybody's so willing to help the other person out.
Agreed. Now,
I really feel that's partially because there technically is no competition at the moment. It's like most craft distilleries, or however they set up their model, when they start to sell the whiskey, that's not the hard part, because most people are coming in buying the whiskey, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes in that is where your dedication comes in.
I agree with everything you just said. And I've thought a lot about that. Is why it is such a kind of a congenial atmosphere. And one thing that somebody once told me, which I buy into, is that you take look at what's the root of American whiskey. Well, first of all, Scotland, and then immigrants came here, and then we made the American, the bourbon industry and American whiskey industry. So, you look at Kentucky, and, my understanding is that so many of those people have been doing this generationally. And let's say, we all live in Kentucky, and, I work at, Wild Turkey, and you work down the street at someplace else, but I work with your best friend, and your best friend's cousin works here. Everybody knows each other. So all these competitive businesses are all staffed by people who are friends and family with each other. And I think that really does get into the DNA of the business. And I think even though we're not in Kentucky, I think that we benefit from that. We part of our culture is because what we learned from people who helped us. So I think there's a lot, maybe as we get bigger, there might be a few sharper elbows in there, but generally speaking, we've had nothing but a warm reception from anybody in the industry, big or small. It's been amazing.
And I agree. I mean, honestly, as it extends out but now again, you're making American single malt. And so that takes us to another conversation. For one, go over the rules of American single malt as far as what you have to, how that differs when you're making the malt whiskey opposed to making bourbon, and then draw the parallels to the difference between American single malt and a Scotch or an Irish whiskey.
Sure.
Just kind of go through that.
Doesn't that sound like an essay question? Draw the parallels to.
I have 20 minutes. I'll open with the fact that the category American single malt is not fully recognized yet even. So right now we're under the federal government, the TTB, we are defined as an American malt whiskey. So for all you bourbon lovers out there, you guys know the definition of bourbon. It's at least 51% corn, distilled within certain parameters, aged in virgin oak. Take that definition and remove the word corn and put in the term malted barley. And that is really how we're loosely defined right now. However, we're, as a community of distillers, we're adhering to a more narrow definition because that's what we want to be. So, we're one of 70 something members of what's called the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission that was founded by Westland, Balcones, Santa Fe Spirits, a few others, maybe Virginia Distilling Company, the people who are really amongst the first ones doing it. Bob and Jim, our forebears, were certainly amongst the first, but they were so small they weren't part of that commission. But at any rate, what we as a group are trying to do is, we know the government was going to inevitably come in and throw some more. Once a bunch of us started to make this single malt, this kind of Scotch product reminiscent in some ways of a single malt Scotch, we knew the government was going to come in and throw boundaries on it. So we figured might as well work with them on it and not get something that we think is ridiculous and have to deal with it. So we've kind of defined it ourselves, and the government is about to approve it as it's a little less restrictive in several ways from both traditional Scotch and from bourbon. So compared to a Scotch, the similarities are a single malt Scotch, we're using only 100% malted barley. So we don't use any corn, no wheat, no rye. So malted barley is the only grain we use. Ours is a non-peated malt. So unlike a lot of like Islay Scotches and things like that have that peaty, smoky character, which I think are wonderful for what they are. It's not what we're trying to do. So up until it goes in, so it's 100% malted barley, just like a single malt Scotch. However, in Scotland, you can only make single malt Scotch on a pot still. You're not allowed to use a column still for the single malt Scotch. You can do it for blends and things like that, for blending whiskey. So we're allowed to use either, just like a bourbon. And now in the aging side, a bourbon, as you guys know, has to be aged in first use oak and first use charred oak. And in American single malt, we've defined it where we can use new or used oak because we want people to have flexibility. We want the category to have some breadth and width. And you look at bourbon and Scotch, they're very heavily defined for good reason. They're these amazing categories that have developed over hundreds of years, and they want to protect them. We're in a different position. We want to encourage new entrants and encourage creativity because at this point in our growth, that's what's going to make us stronger, is getting new people in doing interesting things. So we want to put the guardrails on where it's not too wacky, but also give people room to get in there and experiment and see what they can make.
Well, just for instance, single malt Scotch, on a pot still. But again, if they were to say you had to use new American oak barrels, that would be like tying your hands in the category because you all the Scotches. And the thing, what's really kind of cool is to watch what happens over the last 40 years with bourbon. And now we're getting into where it's got that whole ball rolling and all the rules and everything. And then all of a sudden there's blending and finishing. Basically, single malt has gone through this in Scotland, and it's 600-700 years old. So all the stuff that bourbon's going through has been done already. I mean, Johnny Walker it was a grocery store. He was getting barrels, blending, and everybody loved and it just transferred into this giant, conglomerate of today. But as far as aging in the barrels and how they blend, bourbon's just kind of doing that and discovering itself by taking other stuff and redefining the actual category, where single malt has pretty much gone through the whole thing. So there's a lot of stuff now as far as American single malt. That's a great category to me. And I think it's coming. One, the barrel issue is it's not an issue of a shortage of, everybody's like, well, it's a shortage of oak. It's not. We all know that. It's a shortage of being able to get enough people to get the wood out of the forests. And right now they're having problems doing that. And then you gotta cut it, season it. It's not like you just cut down a tree and the next day you're using a stave. It's not how that works. And so having those used barrels opens up your categories, where one, distilleries here are going to want to ship you the barrels because the shipping costs, and you're closer and everything, and you're able to do it and you don't have to ship, and it's American made. And so I think, you get the support of a lot of the distilleries, getting those barrels, but then it just opens that category up so much. Yeah. You have, looking at your website, you have the wine finishes, the Armagnac, the Cone, all that, the Oloroso sherry and everything, but also what's available down the road is all those bourbon casks and whatever. And I really see that opening this category up hugely. What do you think about that?
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that there's, it seems to me like everything's happening, much more quickly these days. You look at, to take a different comparison, you took it, from the Scotch and bourbon angle, looking at like craft beer. When did that really start? And I guess Anchor Steam was making kind of at the time weird stuff in the 60s, 70s, I guess. And then really, Sam Adams and Harpoon and all these guys that, in the 90s and 2000s that really started to get take hold. That was a decades long cycle. And to me, I feel like it's happening with, craft spirits and then American single malt in particular, but on a much more condensed rate. Like it's all that, all those lessons learned from the past are being incorporated very quickly. So you mentioned earlier, I think I heard it right, was that, 3-4 years ago, samples, some were great, some maybe weren't. I think you're probably starting to see the quality, not just in American single malt, but across categories amongst the newer players is getting better and better, because people are smart and they're learning and they're making good juice, and there's a lot of good whiskey out there. So yeah, I mean, for us, this is not really answering your exact question, but this is kind of tangential to it, in my opinion, is that, what we're trying to produce at Old Line, I can't speak for the rest of the category, but at Old Line, we're not looking to become anybody's, gone are the days where like people say, I'm a Macallan man, all I drink is Macallan. That's the older generation. I'm sure you guys, and I know me, I reach for all sorts of things. I like that, but I had that rotation of 7 or 8 that, that I'll go to a lot more often than others. And with us, we're not trying to kick somebody else out of the grocery cart. We're trying to just be in there with them, right? We want to be, we know that we can't fill, you can't be all things to all people, but we want to provide a flavor profile that is really appealing to the American consumer, typically the bourbon drinker, but give them something very different than they're used to having in that rotation. And that's how we see us winning as a brand inside the category.
So, I'm kind of curious. So, one of the things that makes bourbon so diverse is, I mean, you have your corn, which has to be 51%, but then, we can put rye, we can put wheat, we can vary our barley. And you're barley, right? I mean, you're barley. So, I mean, have you guys looked at sources, small batch barley producers? I mean, talk about where you get your barley from, why you pick that particular barley. And I mean, do you have other, lines or other labels that you're looking at coming out with that are going to feature maybe a different, because I mean, really the base of your whiskey is barley and yeast, right?
Yeah, barley, yeast, water, and oak. Yep.
Yeah, so you can vary your yeast and you can vary your barley, and that's the only thing you can do on the front end to really, make this old wine taste different than, Jones's Locker or whatever else you're going to call your next label. So
you got to watch. I don't know if you've seen The Water of Life. Have you watched that?
I know the movie. I've seen clips. I need to watch the rest of it. But I think I know where you're going. But yeah, go ahead, Ty.
Yeah, I mean, what they get into there as far as season, and then so they feel that where they grow that barley, there's a name for it. I forget what it is. Tincture or
terroir.
Yeah, that's it. That was it. It grows on the ocean, right off the ocean, and that salt gets in that barley and it affects the flavor. They're actually doing right there in Scotland, they're doing scientific experiments on how that affects each area where that barley grows and how that affects the actual. But again, he'll answer the question as far as what else he can do to make the flavor profile.
Yeah, and well, I agree with that. And also another thing that what sets us as far as in the front end, to your point, whiskey, is that the you look at. I mean, I would never say that corn is corn because there's different types of corn, so I'm not going to say that. But the variety in characteristic, in my humble opinion, that you get from corn in a whiskey mash bill, as far as different types, and it's going to be pretty narrow. When you malt a barley, so what they're doing essentially, for those listeners who may not be familiar, malting is taking a grain that hasn't germinated yet, tricking it in a place called a malt house to start to sprout by putting it into water essentially, and then drying it out. So the way that they dry that grain out has a dramatic effect on the flavor. So for example, we only use malted barley, but we use two types. One of them is called a pale malt. If you were to take a bite of that grain out of the bag, it would taste like grape nut cereal. So like, mildly sweet, grainy, pleasant. And then 13% of our mash bill is a deep kiln malt called a C120. C stands for crystal, which is just basically means that some of those sugars, when they dried that grain, they did it at a higher temperature, and it caramelized some of those sugars. So you were to take a bite of that grain, and it tastes like raisin bran flakes. So identical grain before the malting process, but they taste very, very different. So to give you an idea of the malted barley itself, so your point makes a lot of sense because it is one grain, but within that grain, there's so many different flavor profiles you can get. You can get really smoky grain, like peated grain, things like that. So we think we actually have, in some ways, as much, if not maybe even a little more flexibility because of that. And to your other question about what are we going to do, so most of what we do is the same mash bill. It's the 87-13 split I just told you about. And that's what Bob and Jim used to do. And we love it. We don't want to change it. We still get our grain from the same supplier called Great Western Malt House out near Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, Washington. But we do some experimentation. Malting barley doesn't grow really all that great in Maryland. Not saying it can't, but it's really not a big crop down here. It's a short season crop. So we've kind of kept our eyes open for local stuff, something closer to home, but we really haven't found anything compelling yet. But we do import some grain actually from the UK. That's our peated kind of smokier character stuff. So we will vary the mash bill a bit here and there for different types of small run things. But for us, it's that 87-13 virgin oak aging, and then where we do a lot of where the flavor profile for us starts to take different directions is a lot of the barrel finishing. So the Oloroso sherry finishes, the Madeira, the rum finish, those sorts of things are really where we try to take that kind of flagship profile and kind of nudge it in different directions.
Okay. So explain to me chocolate malting.
So chocolate malt will be a term, I forget exactly what the technical definition is, but it's going to be, I mentioned that C120, that crystal malt that we have, that C number, we have C120. C can be C, I don't know the lowest, but it can go up to C 300, 400, 500. That just indicates how much of that caramelization process was allowed to happen in that malting process and drying it out. So a chocolate malt is going to be in the higher end of that spectrum and have a really dark chocolate roasted kind of coffee character. Think about like what you make a Guinness with. so that's really, really deep kiln, heavy malts. And as a result, one of the downsides of using those is that the alcohol content is low because a lot of those sugars aren't fermentable by the yeast anymore. So, we use 13% of that grain because we want to get that flavor. But if we use 100% of it, well, it wouldn't taste like we wanted, but also we get very low alcohol yield. So we have to keep in mind of the economics as well. So malt's going to be a deeper kiln malt, similar to our C120, but even darker.
So if you're making a bourbon and you use a chocolate malt and it's only 4% or 5% or whatever, or 8%, let's just say, you're picking up your sugars from the corn and the wheat 100%. Or the rye.
Exactly. Okay. And for, we don't make bourbon, but my understanding is that really the benefit of barley in a bourbon, more often than not, is the enzymes. I'm not saying it's only that, but that's really, right. It's an enzymatic benefit.
That's where it's the 4%. But like I know Old Elk does 34%. So they actually are making a barley bourbon because that's their secondary grain, malt barley. And then also I know that Rabbit Hole, their Race King Founders series, they use 2 double chocolate malts. I mean, and they use enough of that malt that when you look at that fermentation, it looks like chocolate. I mean, it's just brown and whatever. So yeah, you got to kind of increase it to get that flavor, but it that's one thing. But as far as like what you're saying, as far as single malt, that you've explained and cleared up a lot of stuff that very helpful.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's and one thing I will say too is that I'm glad you mentioned the chocolate malt because our C120, our crystal malt that we use, I think that character is a really important part of what we do. And it carries over really, really well. So not that I want to sit here and tell you what you're going to taste, but one thing that we notice and we try to strive for is to have that kind of dark chocolate cocoa kind of character. Not as overwhelming by any means, but really it's there. A lot of chocolate covered cherry, things like that, some people pick up on. So we just love it. I don't know how Bob and Jim stumbled across that grain, but we're just glad they did.
It's like malto meal.
Malto meal.
There you go. All right, so let's give this a taste.
Yeah. So what you guys are sipping there, what I'm sipping here with you, is our 86 proof expression of our flagship American single malt. So like we said, malted barley, 8713, pale malt and crystal malt. Double distilled, aged 4 to 5 years in a 30-gallon barrel. This is one of our last 30-gallon barrel bottles that those will be phased out in the next few months. And moving into the 53s, that'll be 4 to 7 years old. And then let's see, what did I forget there? I think it aged 4 to 5 years. And virgin oak, number 4 char. Almost all of what we do is number 4 char. We love that char level. And so what we're trying to deliver here, and I'll let you guys tell me if you think we hit it or not, is I alluded to it earlier, is that a single malt for a bourbon drinker. We're not trying to be a bourbon as much as we love bourbon. We're not trying to be that. We're not trying to be a scotch. We're trying to be a single malt that a bourbon drinker would reach for when he or she wants something a little different. And another way I describe it is like, I've never been a DJ, but I've seen those DJ booths with all those, dials and all that. You can turn this up, turn this down. I like to say that we deliver all the same flavors that a bourbon does, just at very, very different levels. So the same things are there, just some are lower, some are higher, which is one way I like to describe it.
So we tasted a little bit. I tasted a little bit on Saturday, but it's like single malts for me, where we do a lot of bourbon drinking. The nose for me is always, because bourbons are always so straightforward, and but the noses on a single malt are a lot more subtle. And I just figured out the nose on here. I get like, if you open up a bag of Skittles and you smelled all the Skittles at once, not a lime Skittle, but you just get that little bit of the citrus twang to it. It just hit me on that when I just finally, it's like sometimes, as you go about and you have your days where you taste better and
Sure. Yeah.
But it's like when you get to analyze something where you analytically, which I get to do a lot, it takes a little. I always find if you keep revisiting it, eventually you can form the opinion. It's really tough a lot of times to just do it in one
Oh,
session.
100% agree.
Although there's a lot of distilleries that they don't have a choice, they just do it in one session.
Well, it's amazing you mentioned the kind of fruit character. There's it's a level of science that I certainly don't understand, but I love that this grain that, like I said earlier, you taste this grain, raisin bran flakes and grape nut cereal. Now those two things with some water and yeast and fermenting and distillation can yield fruit character. It still blows my mind, but it does. And for me, it's a little more like the stone fruit, like nectarine, maybe ripe peach, that sort of thing. But maybe a little citrus, probably the same thing you're smelling. It just comes across to my brain that way.
So it's funny to me. To me, this is going to sound maybe a little left field, but my grandmother still made fruitcake. Like she didn't go to the store and buy one. And so if you take the alcohol out of this nose, because the nose is so light, I mean, it is gentle. But it almost smells like grandma's baking a fruitcake in the room next door.
I use that exact same example, not for this particular one, but for our sherry finish, which is the same whiskey, just finished with sherry. That exact description earlier today is that one to me, the nose is like a fruitcake. And I whether like I don't eat a lot of. I mean, in the holidays I always have a piece.
Oh, no, that you regift that stuff. I mean,
yeah, but the smell is good.
But the smell's good. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well,
it's like those candles my wife buys. I don't want to eat them, but darn, they smell good.
No, I can see that. I mean, that fruit bread is candied, the different candied cherries, and I think that Skittles is in the same. They're a little bit, what would you say, more tart than a candy cherry, but overall, it's the same kind of fruity, sugary kind of thing that goes on. But then the taste.
Yeah, this is not a bourbon. For those of you at home.
Well, it's not. It's an American single malt.
Absolutely.
You're not pulling flavors from corn or a rye. I mean, you're pulling those flavors from that malt. And I initially when I was drinking this, I pick up a lot of honey, and then I pick up that malt oaty kind of flavor. So it gives me the taste of almost like a honey nut Cheerio.
And and I didn't use that description earlier. Somebody else earlier today, and it's the first time I've ever heard that description used, and it's twice in one day. I've heard like cereal grains, breakfast cereal, but two people in one day said honey nut Cheerios, and I get nuttiness and I get honey and sweet, so that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah,
Jeff really likes comparisons to things that have small holes.
He had to put that in. He was supposed to behave. He didn't. There you go.
It's amazing. As you guys know, each barrel is different, right? So when we do our barrel program, we have accounts come in and pick them and whatever. And sometimes I'll pull these samples and like the range is pretty wild. Once in a while, I'll get a barrel that tastes like peach iced tea to me, like stone fruit, nectarine, the tobacco notes, I guess, from the oak, and a little bit of sweet. And other times it tastes like baking spice and cinnamon. I mean, the baseline is all kind of the same, but those variations are just it's wild how much one barrel can vary from the next.
Yeah, I mean the scented honey finish on this is really, I mean that's the true finish to me. What stays on the palate after is a really high end scented honey.
And I really love the viscosity of this. It almost delivers a thickness of that. You're not getting, and although it's light overall as far as the mouthfeel, but the mouthfeel is complete throughout. It goes all the way. It's you can taste in your cheeks, under your tongue. It's not like it's like big and bold and burning, but the flavor is a full tasting experience. There's no doubt about it. So, okay, go ahead.
Oh no, so I appreciate that, and one of the I'm speaking a little out of school here because I know enough to be dangerous behind the still, but I don't know all that much. My business partner and the distiller, they know a lot more than I do. But my understanding of that mouthfeel is that we, as a single malt, and us included, we distill typically in our batch distillation system a little bit deeper into what a bourbon or a rye might consider to be tails. We would consider to still be hearts. And that's a very subjective thing, brand to brand, category to category. If the three of us made whiskey in the same still with the same grain, we'd probably make our cuts a little differently. But you know, that the back end of the hearts, getting into what will become the tails, if you have too much of it, can give you off-putting flavors. But they're also a really nice mouthfeel, buttery character if you get some of those kind of chemicals, natural chemicals in there. So I think that's why that mouthfeel, one of the reasons why it's so rich is that we probably distill to a slightly lower proof than some of our, you know, bourbon peers.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you're now, do you distill? Where are you in the process of distilling? You know, is your distillery where you're distilling open?
Sure.
Are you, you know, give me an update on exactly where you are.
Yeah, so I tend to over answer questions, so I'll do that again here. So when we took over Golden Distillery from the West Coast, so moved out there in 2015, moved it back here. We didn't get open in Baltimore until 2017 for a whole trail of tears of reasons. It just was the way it happened. And so, when we bought Golden, we had all this whiskey that came with it. And anticipating that we'd be producing our own a few months later, we worked with Ryan Lang. We bottled and started selling in Maryland to get the brand out there while we, you know, set up and yada, yada, yada. Well, it turns out that, like I said, it was a much longer process than we anticipated. So we started to get really nervous that we were depleting products and not replenishing it. So the guys out of Middle West were open to talking about contract production. And not only just doing it, but at the time, I mean, it's maybe a little more common now. At the time, this is very uncommon. They were willing to let us come in and use our grain, our yeast, and let us be very hands-on. And, you know, they wouldn't give us the keys and walk out, but they'd let us. Yeah.
I mean, you were there. You were making sure. It's the, what would you say? It's the blueprint of Bardstown Bourbon Company. I mean, that's what they said. And at the time, just, you know, 2016. When they opened, people thought they were crazy. But at the same time, as we've gone through this, it's a very, very good you know, blueprint or actually, you know, business program for whiskey, because of the fact that you have the equipment and the people come in, you work with them, you let them come in with their grains, their mash bills, explain the control they have, and you guys had the control. And it's basically you were distilling, you guys were there distilling, producing the product that you need to produce. And
it was amazing. And then we learned so much. So then, like, you know, Bob and Jim were amazing. But learning how to make whiskey from Bob was like your grandmother teaching you to make a cake. Like, oh, here's step A, step B, step C, step last. Like, do it this way and you'll get this, which is great. I mean, we're enormously grateful to have that. But, you know, the guys at Middle West, when we went out there, helped to teach us all about, you know, hey, here's what's efficient about Bob's process. Here's what's inefficient. Here's how you can make it, we think, better. So they really helped help us really learn, you know, what we had and understand it a lot better. So that was amazing. So yes, to your original question. So Middle West, we originally, kind of like we originally set out to make bourbon and started making American single malt because of just the opportunities we saw and had. Similarly, we originally anticipated eventually doing contract production, but we thought we would max out our production here in Baltimore first, and then years later jump into that. Well, but the circumstances I mentioned before, with taking so long to get here, it flipped that in its head. So we started making out there before we made anything here, and ended up being an enormous benefit because we learned so much and applied those lessons learned. But, you know, we have a 300 gallons, so we have 25,000 square feet, most of which is barrel storage. So all of our barrel aging is here. Occasionally we'll have something out of Middle West that hasn't shipped here yet, but it's really for a few months. So all of our barrel aging's here. We have a 300 gallon pot still, and we do our, whatever is going to become our bottled and bond. And we do a limited run peated whiskey as well. So that kind of small batch stuff happens here. And the workhorse, the engine behind the brand growth, is stuff that we produce with Ryan.
So, you know, you guys kind of, you did what I think a normal person would do, is you decided you wanted to open a distillery, and then you did your research and you did your homework, and you built a distillery, and then you went, oh, shoot, I don't have enough capacity. In hindsight, do you wish you would have overbuilt capacity, and then you could have made up the difference as a contract distiller for someone else, or would you do it?
That's a great question. It's so. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that whiskey.
I was just going to say, would you do it the exact same way again?
Oof.
What'd you learn?
Yeah. So I guess I would say that largely, I think we would do it the same way again, even though it wasn't what we envisioned. And would I like to have a bigger still here? Yes. We certainly will someday, whether it's in this building or someplace we move to, we're going to put in a bigger still. But we love the flexibility and the relationship we have with Middle West. And I think that, we would do it again in a heartbeat. So would we have put in a bigger still? I mean, really, we put in the biggest still we could afford, frankly. I mean,
yeah.
And so,
and it's a pot still.
It's a pot still. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I'd like to have a 1,000-gallon pot still, but I'll take 300 for now.
But at the same time, now, were you, if I'm getting too personal, let me know, but were you pot stilling at Middle West? No.
Yeah. Oh no, that's everything's fair.
You were on their pot still. Okay.
We were pot still in there on a 60-gallon pot still, open flame, believe it or not.
Okay.
So that was open flame, being it would sit on this think of what you cook burgers on at a restaurant, like a flat top grill.
I understand. Yes.
Yeah. And then so we were, and they were actually, believe it or not, single distilling. They were so Bob would take this still looked like it's almost like a big copper like a lava lamp. Like the still head was kind of angled like that. It's hard to explain. You'd see it would make sense, but he would take the lid off that and shove 100 feet of copper mesh up there, and for a month, and then replace it a month later, and then acted as a reflux agent. So he was single distilling, which as soon as we bought it, we started double, which I think was a better way to do it. But they were getting a shockingly good product for that method.
That's some moonshining shit right there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this place, nothing was to any sort of OSHA stand. I mean, if anybody who really wanted to shut it down walked in there, they would have shut that place down.
But that's
that's the beauty of it.
But the beauty of distilling is that you're making a product that basically kills germs. So, because you're doing that,
very clean. It was just nothing it was just safety wise. You sit there and man, I'm sure this is not probably okay, but I'm not going to say anything. But cleanliness wise, it was great. Like you said, even if it wasn't, the germs aren't going to survive.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're dealing with copper right there. That kills germs in itself. So, and then you're dealing with a lot of heat. So,
and then as far as the pot still question, so we're pot still in Middle West. We're pot still here in Maryland, and with Ryan at pot still West Coast, pot still here at Old Line. At Middle West with Ryan, we do our stripping run on a 48-inch bend dome column, and then it goes directly into a finishing run in a pot. So it's a combination for both.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to be respectful of the market.
Yeah, we're right at 45. I was thinking about an hour. Is that cool with you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, because I've been to Middle West. I actually, it's funny because I guarantee you, if you talk to Ryan, what you guys did, they learned too, and so it's always, what would you say? It's
symbiotic or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's great.
Mark gets me. If I let that out there, he would not come up with that and then just laugh at me and say symbiotic and then just
Jeff, nobody gets you.
Anyways. So yeah, so let's talk. Okay, so are you guys thinking that you'll just keep the relationship with Middle West and do what you're doing?
Yep.
That'll just allow you to just get that much more to the market.
Exactly. Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, we fully intend and communicate with them that we want to keep working with them. Like I said, we'd love to put a bigger still in here and produce more here, but the ability to go out there and work with people we've known for how long now? 8-9 years now. to make our whiskey. We've done it for years with them. It just fits like a glove. We love it. And it's so much flexibility. Yeah, they're very good to us. We were one of their first clients. They don't take on that many. And they are very, very, very good to us. So yeah, we envision working with them for the long term, and also increasing our production here in Maryland as well. But they'll always be part of our plan, as far as I can tell.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, Ryan, just you meet Ryan, and I don't know how. I mean, he just fits the bill of the people in the whiskey industry.
100%.
He's just a quality person, and he's working towards the same goal you guys are working, and they're can't say much right now, but it's like they'll meet the demand for a lot of people. That's for sure.
Yeah, Arch was out there recently talking. So yeah, definitely, there's a lot of exciting things happening there. That business is really impressive.
Yeah, and what he's doing, and you just see how he works and how much he loves what he's doing, and it's just fantastic. We've been down there a couple times. We'll be going down there again soon. I mean, we're out of Canton, about 2 hours away from there. So if you guys are if you guys come up to Middle West and you're doing a run, let us know. I'd love to see you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And then if we're ever out there in the Baltimore area. But last but not least, what is there anything you wanted to we haven't covered that you wanted to put out there, as far as you got anything up and coming? How can people find you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I guess, I always forget that part. So I'll do that first. Is if people do want to find out more, our website's oldlinespirits.com. So OLDLINE spirits with an S at the end, .com. There's a store locator. We're in Maryland, DC, Delaware, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Colorado right now, as far as states that we sell in.
Jeff's man cave.
Yeah, that's right. And Tiny's man cave. But we can't ship, but we have a partner in DC who can ship to a lot of states. So all that, it can be found on our website. And the big thing, I guess, big picture wise, is that the biggest challenge for companies in our industry, in our category rather, I think, is that what is in the bottle probably in many ways doesn't reflect what a consumer might think when they pick up and they see single malt. What's in the bottle is maybe a lot different than you expect. And for us, trial, whether it's Old Line or another brand, it's a lot of great single malts out there. We really encourage people to try them because I think a lot of people don't think they like malt. A lot of bourbon drinkers, and then they try an American single malt and they find one they like, and it really opens up a lot of room in what they like to taste. So at any rate, we ask for people to give it a go, and whether it's Old Line or somebody else doing good things, give the category a chance. And that would be a big thing for us.
Yeah. So Mark, so I guess, just based on what I do for a real job, because this doesn't pay the bills.
No.
Nor does this.
So let's say I'm a diehard Scotch drinker. So let's say you and I have been running into each other in the bar, and I've got a monkey shoulder or a Johnny Walker in front of me. I mean, what's the message you tell people to say, you know what? There's this bottle called Old Line.
Yeah.
It's a single malt whiskey. And I think that, it's like whether you're a diehard bourbon or Scotch drinker, you got to tell them something to get them to try it, right? Unless you give it to them for free and help pour it down their throat.
Sure. Yeah.
Most people are not gonna take the chance until somebody tells them. So what do you tell them?
Sorry, go ahead, Danny.
You pull out your flag and you go USA.
That's right.
USA. No, okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
patriot or not. So I'll answer that two slightly different ways. If you're a Scotch guy, for me, the message would be, basically one thing I would de-emphasize is the age statement, because not every Scotch drinker, but a lot of Scotch drinkers are very heavily focused on age statement for a lot of reasons, right? Because the Scotch use second use barrels and they age in a mild climate. It takes a lot longer for that process to really kind of take. But a lot of times you hear 4 or 5 year. A bourbon drinker is like, hey, sure, all right, I get it. A lot of Scotch drinkers think that's light until they try it. So for me, it's the message on a Scotch drinker is, hey, this is all the things you love in a malt because it is a malt, but see what a virgin oak barrel can do to a malt whiskey because they don't really encounter that almost, in Scotland. It's almost always used. And then for the bourbon drinker, it's kind of a different angle is, okay, you've tried malts, maybe you didn't take to them. This is, aside from the grain we use, it's produced like a bourbon. Once it's distilled, the rest of it, once it's mashed, the rest of the process is very, very bourbon in style. So, this is a malt whiskey designed for a bourbon drinker is the way I describe it to a bourbon drinker. And really, to your point, it's just getting them to get liquor to lips and try it. And is it for everybody? No, but it's, our conversion rate, I'll say, to people who try it and love it is very high. Of course, occasionally you have people out there who just don't like malt, and that's fine. You can't be all things to all people, but just trying to find what gets that person interested and trying to show how Old Line can tie into that without being a bullshit artist, really,
Yeah, because you're not a Scotch, right? You're not a bourbon.
Correct.
Well,
Yes.
But I think that somebody that is ignorant and doesn't know this flavor profile should try this.
I mean, honestly, don't you think you're closer to an Irish whiskey than you are a Scotch? I mean, from the standpoint of taste and everything that's going on.
So I don't think so, but you are not alone in saying that. A lot of people whose palates I respect have said that same thing. That's not the way I kind of internalize it, but you're not alone in saying that. The way I would, if I were to describe it, like at a tasting or something, says, hey, listen, I'm not drinking today. What is it? Tell me what it tastes like. If I had to describe it to somebody I didn't know the level of whiskey knowledge they had, and they only had 5 to 10 seconds, I'd say, okay, if you had a Woodford Reserve over here, like an Oak 4 bourbon, and a McLaughlin over here, maybe right in between, maybe a nudge on the bourbon side is how I would describe it. To somebody in a hot second, I only had a second to describe it. That's pretty quick and dirty and rough, but that's probably how I could communicate it very quickly to somebody with a bag full of groceries that needed to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. So
yeah.
You didn't give us where to go to find you and everything. Give us
at oldlinespirits.com, and then there's a store locator on there. You can also find when the distillery is open. So when you come out to Baltimore, hopefully, well, you guys just let us know. We'll open the doors when we're not open. But for the average mortal who isn't you guys,
Jeff will just sleep on the sidewalk like he does on bourbon drops.
Yeah. You might wake up without your wallet if you sleep on the sidewalk, but
my name might be tiny, but no one's challenging me for my wallet, right?
Okay.
But you can find the distillery hours when we're open, which is Fridays and Saturdays. We have a full bar, so we have we have beer. We carry beer and wine as well. That way, if people people who don't drink whiskey, they can come here and enjoy a cocktail or beer.
That's awesome.
We're very lucky to have that, and then the store locator, and then and if you're in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Colorado, Maryland, DC, Delaware, you should have a place not too far from you where you can pick it up.
Nice.
You working on Ohio?
Ohio, we've avoided the control states for the most part, just because they can be a real challenge. But Ohio, we've talked to Ryan about it. Actually, we would like to be out that way.
Because if you do, I have the person to contact, and she can get you all the stuff and walk you through. It's really not that bad.
Okay.
And they love to do barrel picks, and I mean, it's just
we love them too.
Yeah. So, and Ohio really has flipped that control state negativity to turn it into a positive thing. So we've got a director for OHLQ that Jim has been basically, he's a whiskey lover, and he's pretty much between 2017 and 23 completely flipped everything around. So I'll definitely, if you want to, get you in touch with the right people.
I would love to have that conversation. Absolutely. And it's news to me that I'm interested in chatting more about that. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody. Wonderful to have you here, Mark. It was a good podcast. I mean, it's a really good whiskey. I've enjoyed it. Had seconds when I probably shouldn't have, but at the same time. He's driving and I'm not.
Around 6 or 7, that never hurt anybody.
Yeah, no. So anyways, we appreciate you coming on, and Old Line Spirits, check out their American single malt, plus check out their website. They've got a lot of finished American single malts, and they're doing a lot of different things. So definitely something everybody should check out. Tracy, Tracy Green, she basically was the one. I met her in Kentucky, and she reached out, and I'm glad that she did, because you guys are making good whiskey. Great story. You got the whole thing. I really think you got the backstory and everything. And so hopefully in 300 years, you're still going, and you're part of the whole thing, so it's kind of a cool thing when it comes to whiskey, right? It's timeless.
We had somebody ask if you sell the peated product in Michigan.
No, we're not in Michigan, and the peated is mostly distillery only at this point, because it's not a full release yet. So that'll be a while, and unfortunately, a while in getting out. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I didn't say it before, but thank you for your service. And
likewise, and
thank you
on both fronts, and thank you guys. I'm really glad Tracy connected us, and she's great. And this
Are you just saying that because I know Jeff pretty well.
Yeah. I owe Jeff money, so I got to be nice.
Yeah.
So he could change his opinion after we meet it down at Middle West, or out by you guys.
So come up to the Football Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Canton, Ohio. Yeah, good area. Lots of places to stay.
Good times.
All right, so stay on, because we're going to finish up here. We're going to play it, and I'm going to stop the recording, but hang on, because we definitely have some things to talk about. All right, everybody, www.scotchybourbonboys.com. Check out everything Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Make sure you check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, and then also all major podcast formats. Remember, listen, comment, and subscribe. And with that, good bourbon, good whiskey equals good times and good friends. And make sure that you all go out there and live your life dangerously. Little Steve-O's going to take us out.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die.
Dant Crossing, Gethsemane, Kentucky. Timeless hospitality that stirs the spirit. Dant Crossing is a one-of-a-kind destination for unforgettable weddings, memorable corporate events, day trips, and weekend getaways. The pastoral campus is anchored by Log Still Distillery and includes an amphitheater that seats 2,000, a 12-acre lake for fishing, and unique lodging options, creating an immersive experience that's rooted in the community and culture of our little slice of Kentucky. More attractions will open soon at Dant Crossing, including our 21,000 square foot distillery, which we will have the ability to produce 15,000 barrels of spirit each year, a network of wooded walking trails, fully functional private train depot, farm-to-table restaurant, and the Legacy, a premier wedding and events venue. Whether you're looking to host an event, book a stay, or reserve a tasting, we're ready to welcome you. Learn more at dantcrossing.com.